Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome back today to the poem of the day for Tuesday, August 26th, 2025. If you're just joining now and haven't seen the previous two videos, I recommend going back to watch those first because today is our third day in the week-long series about Samuel Taylor Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And so we are on part 3 of 7. Where we last left our heroes, as they say, although heroes is a bit of a fraught term in this case. The mariner who is speaking a majority of the poem, his crew began to turn on him. They were really sort of wishy-washy about how they felt about his decision at the end of Act 1 to shoot the albatross with his crossbow. They weren't sure if shooting of it was destroying a omen of bad things to come that the albatross might have brought the fog and the mist that got them caught originally, or if the albatross was a vessel for like a Christian spirit that was something that saved them and that brought the south winds to warm up the sea and the ice around them to free them. But near the end, as the days in part 2 go longer and longer, and they go days without seeing any land, and it feels as though they're not even moving in the boat, and there's even a description of feeling as though the sun was receding. The crew decides that it was a bad thing, and they hang the albatross over the mariner's neck. So that was the end of Act 2, or Part 2. Sorry. As I was reading and preparing for Part 3, I have to tell you first, you're in for some crazy stuff here. Just to kind of advertise these videos a little bit, I posted a quote from The Lighthouse by Robert Eggers, and Eggers has to love the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. If you're not familiar with Eggers' work, he made The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and then recently Nosferatu. And he's very interested in this element of dark romanticism and what the things that are terrifying about the sublime in nature. You can see that especially in The Lighthouse. And some of the images that are going to appear in part 3 here are some nightmare fuel. So that said, I think the structure as well begins to break down in interesting ways, not completely fraught and torn up, but the mariner's words become more ecstatic and more exclamatory, and his phrases more extreme. And so it becomes a bit harder to read, at least for me, aloud with the rhythm. But with that said, here is part 3 of The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge from 1798. There passed a weary time. Each throat was parched and glazed each eye. A weary time, a weary time. How glazed each weary eye when looking westward I beheld a something in the sky. At first it seemed a little speck, then it seemed a mist. It moved and took at last a certain shape, I wist. A speck, a mist, a shape, I wist. And still it neared and neared, as if it dodged a water sprite. It plunged and tacked and veered. With throats unslacked, with black lips baked, we could nor laugh nor wail. Through utter drought all dumb we stood. I bit my arm and sucked the blood and cried, "A sail! A sail!" With throats unslacked, with black lips baked agape, they heard me call, "Gramercy!" They for joy did grin, and all at once their breath drew in as if they were drinking all. "See, see," I cried, "she tacks no more. Hither to work us wheel, without a breeze, without a tide. She steadies with upright keel." The western wave was all aflame, the day was well nigh done. Almost upon the western wave rested the broad bright sun, when that strange shape drove suddenly betwixt us and the sun. and straight the sun was flecked with bars. Heaven's mother send us grace. As if through a dungeon grate he peered with broad and burning face. Alas, I thought, and my heart beat loud, how fast she nears and nears. Are those her sails that glance in the sun like restless gossamers? Are those her ribs through which the sun did peer as through a grate? And is that woman all her crew? Is that death? And are there two? Is death that woman's mate? Her lips were red. Her looks were free. Her locks were yellow as gold. Her skin was as white as leprosy. The nightmare, life in death, was she, who thicks man's blood with cold. And naked Hulk alongside came, and the twain were casting dice. The game is done. I've won, quoth she, and whistles thrice. The sun's rim dips, the stars rush out. At one stride comes the dark. With far-heard whisper o'er the sea, off shot the spectre bark. We listened and looked sideways up, fear at my heart, as at a cup. My lifeblood seemed to sip. The stars were dim and thick as night. The steersman's face by his lamp gleamed white. From the sails the dew did drop. Till clomb above the eastern bar the horned moon with one bright star within the neither tip. One after one, by the star-dogged moon, too quick for groan or sigh, each turned his face with a ghastly pang and cursed me with his eye. 4 times 50 living men, and I heard nor sigh nor groan. With heavy thump, a lifeless lump, they dropped down one by one. The souls did from their bodies fly. They fled to bliss or woe. And every soul, it passed me by, like the whiz of my crossbow. Whew. I mean, that is some really terrifying stuff. And the images are so vivid. My imagination's just reeling because you can shoot the movie scene of this so vividly. Especially after the stillness and the isolation and the boringness and mundanity that was depicted in the second part, which I think is something that's very strong and interesting about what Coleridge is doing here as a romanticist who is having his characters encounter the sublime in nature. And the sublime being something here that's first recognized by the characters as the only way that they can conceive of it is through a Christian paradigm, but very quickly it goes completely into the supernatural that they have no way of making sense of what it is that they're seeing. It doesn't abide by any sort of mythological tradition, and it doesn't abide by any sort of theology. So to just summarize quickly, he's seeing what appears to be a speck on the horizon, a ship drawing near, but it's moving really, really fast. And he's unable to cry. They're all unable to cry out for it because they're so parched. They're so thirsty and their lips are dry from the sun. So he bites into his own arm and uses the blood to like wet his palate just so that he can cry out that he sees a sail. And what he sees then, at first they have these flashes of joy, but as it gets closer and as it moves faster, and as it seems to sort of blot out the sun and the moon as they change as it appears to be this sort of skeleton ship with gossamer threads and with ribs on it. So it resembles to them this kind of a great decayed body. And the only thing that they're seeing on this body is 2 people. They see death, and then what it takes him a while to characterize as life in death is the second character that's here, and that's the woman who seems to be death's mate or spouse or partner in crime here. And as he describes it, she is full of life and dangerous and seemingly beautiful until this last simile around around line 190. Her lips were red, her looks were free, her locks were yellow as gold. All of this is describing a um, woman of exemplifying the beauty standards of the time. But then this last simile is her skin was as white as leprosy. And I know that extremely pale and white skin was also something that, within the English aristocracy was valued as being particularly beautiful, but often you would hear it likened to, something like porcelain. But here, white as leprosy has this terrifying image that I think enacts precisely what the men on the ship went through, which is, oh, we're being saved. And then as it gets closer, like, oh no, it's way worse than we imagined. It would be worse almost if nothing ever came by. So we're kind of teased in with these first three metaphors, descriptions. The lips were red, the looks were free, the locks were yellow as gold. And then we get to that last one of white. And we're primed to think, white as porcelain or something, this clean, pure whiteness, but it's white as something that is decaying and diseased and contagious. And they realize that on the ship, then death and life and death are casting dice. And what are they playing for? They're playing for the souls of the men on board. But another turn here is that life in death, she wins and proclaims her win, her victory. But then death goes and quickly claims all 200 of the other men on the boat. So we learn in this moment, and the mariner learns in this moment, that they were playing dice for his soul specifically. And so all of these men then are sent whizzing by like arrows out of a crossbow towards bliss, heaven, or towards woe, hell. But then it's left that the mariner is the one who will be dealt with by life in death. And given that they were playing for him, it seems as though his lot, his fate, is going to be much worse than a quick and sudden death, especially in a time like this when that might be something like a relief for them. So this takes us to nearly halfway through the poem. It takes us to line about 225, and the entire poem, by my count, runs about 625 lines. So we're not quite halfway through, and yet so much has already happened, and it feels narratively like we've reached the climax of it. But there's still so much more to go. So I hope that you'll join me throughout the rest of the week for parts 4 through 7 to see this kind of terrifying ghost tale come to a conclusion. I'm going to sign off as I usually do by wishing you peace, but it feels somewhat ironic given the really horrific nature of what we just read. Perhaps that's while you'll need it even more this time, peace, so that you can get some rest this evening. So again, peace be with you, my friends, and I hope to see you again soon.